So one of the things that we've really been focused on as we talk about IT in the business is having a list of work that you can communicate back and forth so that everybody understands the overall list. And as we've talked about, there's like three main types of work that we like to focus on: tech debt, backlog, and then project work. So Lysander, how do you think about backlog in your world?
So in my world, the backlogs that I'm working with are generally a mixture of things. Sometimes they're customer requests for defects or enhancements. Sometimes they're things that developers have noticed are wrong with the software or other internal folks have noticed. Sometimes they're, smaller ideas that the product teams or maybe sales or marketing will have for the product that kind of go into this pile, but for whatever reason haven't been worked on very quickly. So the backlogs tend to grow over time, and no one focuses on it, but no one's willing to actually take a look at the list to prioritize what should be done. But then also, there's things on there that we'll never ever do, right? And at some point, someone should make a decision and make that known to whoever requested it, saying, look, this was a great idea, but we're never going to do it. Let's get rid of it so we don't have to keep tracking it.
In some respects, not the traditional definition of unplanned work, but it really, in these three contexts, it is unplanned
Well, it
work.
becomes unplanned work because no one wants to focus on it, right? There's
But
always
it's not redo, which is
Right.
really the definition of unplanned work, but it's certainly not work that you was part of your project list.
right.
Do you have a different definition of the backlog?
To some extent, I view backlog items of just an ingestion of work and a place to put it. I throw all the requests that come to, like from a DevOps perspective, requests that come through either the ticketing system or emails or however I get it. I tend to put that into my backlog, and then through our bi-weekly sprints, we'll go through and we'll groom the backlog, pull out what we think we should be doing, and when we can do it, and get it into our sprint works. Beyond that, it's really, for me, it's just a placeholder of work that we need to get to at some point.
Yeah, and from the ops world, it's the same. It's really the day-to-day ticket work. It's the release is going out. Someone needs to take care of it and babysit it. And then for us, in the tech debt, especially in the infrastructure ops side of it, it's, you're running an old version of Windows and you're going to have to come along and upgrade it. It's this particular server is problematic and you have to go back and fix it. With a more bigger project, it's actual things from a technical standpoint that are behind. I don't know from a development or DevOps if you look at the tech debt differently, or you had to cut a corner. That's the other problem that we've seen a lot, is that we intentionally did something that we know we're going to have to come back and fix later. Like the AWS rollout we just did.
Yeah.
We hand-built prod, and we're going to come back later and fix it with Terraform. That's how I think of tech debt.
Yeah, and I'd say from a DevOps perspective, I have very little that falls into a tech debt bucket. I think Lysander with the application side probably has more tech debt items than either you or I would have with infrastructure and DevOps. I would have a few things regarding either upgrading various solutions that we're using, if we're hosting them on-prem. The SaaS tools, clearly we don't have to worry about that. There's a few things that I need to upgrade, but basically I really have a small amount of tech debt in my inventory.
Yeah, we have more than I would care to have, and a lot of it comes from, there's schedule pressure, so we've got to take shortcuts, and those shortcuts, in the short term, help us get something out when we want to get it out, but tend to cause problems down the road.
I think the last category is project work, and I think the business tends to focus on project work because they tend to be big dollar amounts. There's some expected outcome from them. They're supposed to add some new feature to the business. But in reality, especially in the ops world, project work is maybe 50% of our workload. Most of it is the tech debt and the backlog items. I don't know about it from a dev standpoint.
It's a mixture, right? I think it kind of depends on where the business is at. There's been times when our focus is completely on, fixing defects. Then there's other times where, it might be several
Backlogs, defects.
Right. I look at everything. Everything's going into the backlog at some point, and it's what you choose to focus on as you're pulling stuff out of it, right? There's been times when we've been focused on more of the defects that are in the backlog as opposed to the enhancements or projects that are there.
The project work, though, those items, I don't look at, yours or mine. I look at that as more of ours, because I wouldn't keep a separate
Hours?
hours.
Do I get to play?
You do. There's because the project bucket of work should be comprehensive. It should have infrastructure. It should have DevOps and architecture. It should have all the app development stuff in it, where it's not I don't have it as this is what I'm going to have specifically from a DevOps perspective or DevOps sprint, or I wouldn't imagine that you'd have it specifically for an infrastructure. I would look to the project and how we're managing that work as, I have some tasks in that project bucket that I need to manage as part of the project.
Yeah, I guess where I would differ on that is when I think of the backlog, I think of what's in there. They're still, they're not at the idea stage, but they're not fully baked, right? So I don't know necessarily what tasks are
But you're
there.
including project stuff, because you're thinking about like the TFS or Azure DevOps backlog, PBIs that have been created that are sitting out there. Whereas backlog, at least as I think about it, is known work that exists that doesn't include project work.
I'm thinking about both, though, right?
Okay.
You could have something small in either one of those things where I know I've got to, make a button blue that was green, right? That's going to be developer focused. That's going to be small, but you could also have something where you're, it's going to be 500 hours worth of work. I need some engineering time. I need some DevOps time. But when it's in the backlog, you may not, it's not fully flushed out, right? So when you pull it off and start working on it, that's when you would recognize, hey, Rob, I need some help from your team. Tim, I need some help from your team. And grow it.
And I think what's important, tying back to the theme of this, is the communicating with the business. When you're doing planning, when you're developing your project list, talk to the business, the ratio of tech debt to project work to backlog that I have in infrastructure is going to be different from yours, going to be different from yours. But it all makes up our available FTE. And as we're talking with the business, I need to set aside 1.7% of an FTE to always care and feed the databases, or to always do some other piece of work that needs to be protected allocation, so that I have this many people, I have that 0.3 person left over to do project work, and use that for my estimating, not the 3 FTEs that I would normally have.
Yeah, and being able to communicate that back up to the business on like the status of a project. I wouldn't want to have to pull from 3 different areas to be able to provide that single set of metrics that the business is looking for any particular project. That's why I look at, from a project perspective, all of our separate tasks, all of the work that's supposed to be done, regardless of the area that's doing that work, is managed as a single project, as part of that project. And then all the metrics and stuff are built and aggregated up to business through that single grouping of tasks.
Yeah, and report that way. I was thinking more when it comes to when you start planning. Planning out an IT budget can be a very daunting task. Mm-hmm. But I think about it from an ops standpoint. I have all these tasks. I can go back to historically to my tickets, just my day-to-day tickets. How much time is spent in this group? How much time is spent in that group? And set my baseline of my model and say everything above that is going to be needed for projects. So if I can't hire anybody and I got 1.2 people left, that's all the hours I have each week to support you with development or support you. If we want more than that, then hey, we need to hire. This is my justification for hiring. Or planning out my execution time. I got 50 hours a week for this person, the 1.2, it's 200 hours. It takes 4 weeks. You can't dip into your care and feeding type people.
Are you calculating that baseline considering your backlog items, or a percentage of the backlog as far as getting
usually the way I like to do it historically. So go back and look over how much good ticket data I have, how much was done day-to-day ops, how much was care and feeding, how much was backlog, things that existed in a normal routine. Mm-hmm. And all that is like a protected capacity.
Okay.
But what do you do when you don't have that reference data to go back to?
Use your own. There's some reference in material that you can go Google for, you have 200 employees, you have this many things, and try to estimate it and learn from it. Maybe you estimate it at 33%. You get 6 months in the year and realize that I'm spending 50% of my time, 50% of my team's resource capacity doing that. And you have to learn from it. That goes back to your continuous planning, which I love and think is good.